Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the TraderMerlin Show. It is your Tuesday edition. Is it Tuesday? It is Tuesday. Tuesday edition of the TraderMerlin Show. We're going to have Justin Krebs up here in just a second to talk about understanding estate planning. But before we dive into that, I will just say our show yesterday talking about the current attack that's going on in crypto with Binance. You saw what happened with Coinbase again today. The good news is the industry is standing up against it and they're fighting. However, if you have a Binance account, I don't know if I know they're trying to freeze it. I don't know if he approved it yet, but they were doing a temporary restraining order, emergency restraining order to freeze all of Binance.us assets. So if you can log in, see if you can get your money off there ASAP, but it may already be frozen. So the reason why I think that is terrible is this same action happened with Online Trading Academy where they froze the assets. And this goes back to the discussion I mentioned about how a government agency can bleed a company out by just locking up their assets, not giving them due process of the law, not allowing them to get a day in court, and ultimately the company just has to either settle with massive fines or they go bankrupt trying to fight this thing because they can't get to court. Anyway, we'll move on from there. We'll dive into the deeper topics, which maybe I'll talk some more about crypto at the end of the show today, but I want to get Justin on the program. We're talking understanding estate planning. We'll look at trust, we'll look at wills, and a few other things. Of course, we're joined by Justin Krebs today of theproactiveinvestor.com. Justin, how you doing, my friend?
Good, Merlin. How about you?
Good. Are you all in crypto? You have all your clients' wealth sitting at Binance.us right now, right?
Man, if I got my clients into crypto, because I specialize in retirement, right?
Yes,
The retirees, and I'd probably get audited so often you'd make your head spin. So
well, at least you might have more. You could have an intimate relationship with Gary Gensler as well, then.
yeah, I'm okay with that. I don't need that kind of relationship. So
no, I'm with you. I don't want nothing to do with that guy anyway. The reason I thought it would be interesting to do the show today is I've had a couple questions on estate planning and wills and trusts, but having gone through this process a couple times personally, I guess the need for estate planning and thinking ahead of time so that all those ducks are in a row when, unfortunately, things happen is critical. And I thought maybe we could talk about some of the best practices. What are some of the considerations people might want to think about as they are in retirement and thinking about legacy planning and what to do with their estates and how to pass it on. So I guess if someone came into you and said, look, I'm 75, I've got this money, I got a whole bunch of assets, I got some kids, what would be kind of your first step for them to say, okay, let's start thinking about estate planning?
I mean, that's a good question. Hopefully they don't wait till 75 until they do that kind of stuff. But
I threw that on purpose. I threw that out there to you.
I mean, reality, and just so everybody knows, I'm not an estate attorney. I'm just, I don't try to provide legal advice, but I am a financial advisor, and I do things a little bit differently. And with that being said, I think that obviously advising is more about just investments, portfolios, and all that stuff. It has to do with a lot of different areas, and I really don't think you have a full financial plan unless you actually have an estate plan. Now, how that looks, it's going to obviously kind of morph over your lifetime. But the reality of it is that we all focus on making money. But estate planning is more about how we distribute that, especially after we pass away. So, I mean, you got to think, and you've had some experience, obviously. But I mean, the reality of it is that estate planning is kind of a gift you give to your loved ones, right? I mean, think about what happens when you pass away. When you pass away, now all your assets are going to pass to whoever you want them to go to. And if you don't put the things in place that you need to properly, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. So the loved ones that you have that you think, hey, I'm going to leave this behind to them, they're trying to grieve you. And in the meantime, trying to figure out, hey, what happens with this account? What do I do with this account? How do I do this? Where do we go with this? And it becomes a nightmare for, in a lot of cases for a long period of time. It becomes an expensive process. So, yeah, I think that's important.
I've seen it destroy families. And I say destroy, absolutely. I mean, in two personal examples, one of my really good friends, parents had passed away, and there's two sisters and two brothers. And one of the brothers was just taking everything, taking all the assets, and he was the executor of the estate, so he had that power to do so. And completely, the sisters want nothing to do with this guy anymore. They hate his guts. Another situation, a guy with 5 brothers and sisters. Again, the one started to take over and was just taking all these assets for themselves, and was like, well, wait a minute, hold on a second. We were tight-knit, close-knit family before all this money came to be, and all of a sudden we all hate each other. So I think you can put steps in place where those assets get to the appropriate beneficiary. You can make sure things go where you want them to go, but it has to be all done up front and well thought out.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, that's why estate planning is kind of like your gift of love to your beneficiary. So I don't consider my practice a full practice without actually going into that realm. So if somebody comes in and they got, hey, I've got these assets, I got this assets, like you're saying, one of the first conversations that I have is about their family, right? So, are they married? Do they have kids? Do they have grandkids? And what does that look like as far as when they, because nobody wants to answer that question. Like, when you die, what do you want to have happen? That kind of is a terrible conversation, but the reality is that's something you need to address. So, especially if they have kids or grandkids, if the grandkids are younger or the kids are younger, putting some of these estate documents into place that allows them to distribute it properly, I think is even more crucial. Obviously, if you don't have anybody, don't have any kids or grandkids or something like that, then estate planning isn't as important. Now we can go in the tax realm because to me, there's 2 major areas of estate planning, and they may not be called estate planning, but I consider estate to be how you distribute money and how you basically reduce your liability and taxes and stuff of that nature. So I guess let's start with the distribution side. So I think most folks, they're kind of convinced that a will is the most appropriate way to go. And they're convinced in a lot of different ways. I mean, the industry, unfortunately, the legal industry kind of pushes you in that direction, because for lawyers, that's the second largest source of income is probate planning. So they kind of push you in that direction, and they're like, all right, well, will is kind of a good way to go. Now, will does a lot of really good things. Let's not knock on wills, but a will is always going to take you through probate. And for those of you who don't know what the probate process is out there, well, that was almost a tongue twister.
It was a good one.
Yeah. It's a public process of going through and basically you're kind of suing yourself. It's a lawsuit to sue yourself because you're really taking all the assets through a public process to make sure that all the creditors and debtors that you have, they're compensated for and all that kind of stuff. So to understand everybody, what goes on is that you have a will, you have an executor to that will, you die, the executor becomes a lackey to the court. It's because the executor has to come in, they have to kind of inventory all your assets, all your accounts, all that kind of stuff. They have to lay that out and inventory that. Then they have to pay the debt. They have to pay the creditors on that. And then that cleans the slate on your estate. Then that goes through the courts. The courts then distributes that money or, distribute your assets. And then basically that's being settled.
And by the way, let me just say before you go any further, the statement that Justin has made it sound very simple and efficient. It is a long, drawn out, cumbersome process where you have to physically go to the court appearance. I had to fill out all these documents and everything had to be perfect. One letter was wrong. They sent me home. I had to go back and schedule appointments. It took a very long time, and it's a complete pain in the ass. Like you said, you're suing yourself. Yeah, I felt like I was the attorney. I didn't want to hire an attorney to do it, which you can do. But, if you hire someone to probate your estate, they may take 10%. You got $1 million estate, you just gave them $100,000. Forget it. I decided to do it all myself. So it's an extremely difficult process. But one thing that I wish my parents had done was to set up everything, think of it in advance, right? We all know that we're going to die. No one wants to admit it, but it may happen today. I could get electrocuted doing this show, or I could live another 50 or 100 years. Who knows? But have these things lined up so that when it does get to that point of probate, it's much simpler to say, oh, these assets, they're going here because you designated beneficiaries, or this house is going to go here because you're on the, clean it up as much as possible. Try to keep it as clean and not as messy as my personal numbers are. But I don't have any family to really give it to, so I'm not worried.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what I mean. It's kind of a real good estate planning is like a gift of love because like you said, it's a nightmare process. And by the way, the stats on probate are you're going to spend an average of over a year in the probate process. Man,
While you're trying to grieve, on top of all this.
yeah, exactly. While you're trying to grieve, while you're trying to handle your sibling, your siblings, your relatives, all that kind of stuff who become vultures at some point sometimes. Um, you're trying to figure out all of that in about a year's time, and the average probate process costs about 3 to 5% of your gross estate. And people go, "Oh yeah, the stinking state." And isn't the state that gets most of that money? It's the lawyers that get most of that money. So if you don't want that to happen, there's an alternative, and this is what I usually set up with most of my clients. Is we usually set up a trust. Now we should go into this because I know that there's different types of trust, but there's two main groups of trust. There's irrevocable and revocable. We'll skip for now the irrevocable trust because irrevocable trusts are their own entity, and they're really used for avoiding things like the estate tax and the estate inheritance tax. So their own little entity, and they're only right for a certain percentage of people out there with certain assets and stuff of that nature that we can talk at some other show. But the reality of it is that the group that's called revocable trusts, that's or otherwise known as living trusts, those are kind of the trust that most of the clients that I work with steer towards. And the reason for it is, bottom line, is a trust basically does not allow anything to go through probate. So anything, if you set up a trust and you title your assets into the trust, all of those assets are avoid probate, and they can be settled literally within a few days after you being passed away.
Right. Yep,
So,
fast, efficient, and again, all planned out. Like you say, if you go through that probate process, you have people crawling out of the woodworks. Everybody wants this, that, and the other thing, and it becomes very difficult and cumbersome. And as Big Eb says, probate is a cruel thing to do to your family. Spend the money and get a trust, and they're not that expensive. As Justin will tell you, you can probably do them all yourself. You're gonna have to pay some filing fees and document fees, etc. But you can do them yourself. I know Michael, you were talking about LegalZoom and things like that. Certainly you could do that, but be really careful with those ones. Again, this is something it's a serious structured legal thing. You want to make sure it's done properly. And I don't know, I personally would probably get a lawyer involved just to make sure I had covered all my bases. It's worth a few bucks just to do that, but it'll certainly be a lot cheaper to have a lawyer set up a trust rather than a lawyer do your probate for you, which would be far more expensive.
Oh, 100%. So first of all, there are ways to go about getting a trust. So number one, obviously, you can go to a state attorney. If you go to a state attorney, they can walk you through. They can give you those advice and help you answer the questions that need to go into the trust, especially if you have maybe a complexity of a situation. Like, hey, you want to detail you got like 20 beneficiaries. You want to set up multiple trusts for those. Yeah, let's talk to a state attorney about that. But if you're just like a mom and pop, you're sitting here going, all right, you know what? Yeah, I've got a family, I've got, kids, they have grandkids, I have some retirement accounts, I've got a house, I've got maybe some real estate property, and it's fairly modest. Maybe you have a few $1 million of assets or something of that nature. Then you can actually use services. You can use LegalZoom. I have a professional service that I usually actually use with my clients that I just pass along the cost to them. But it's actually a team of lawyers that work with just financial professionals like myself, advisors like myself, who want kind of estate planning, in addition, as a service that I offer my clients as well. So is it expensive? Sure. I mean, if you go and see an estate attorney for a trust, you're going to be somewhere between $2,000 and $5,000 of how you want things set up. But a will isn't all that less expensive, honestly. I mean, wills are usually $1,000 to $2,000 as well. But the difference between the trust and the will is, there's actually quite a few differences. But really, the main difference is that a trust really does everything that a will can do. plus more. Plus, a trust just allows you to distribute the assets as you want them. You can detail how you want it being distributed. So, for example, I just had a client in here just a few hours ago. They wanted that their grandkids to have money. So when they died, they wanted their grandkids to have X amount of money, but they wanted distributed in a way because the kids were so young. They wanted to distribute it for, like get a certain amount at age 20 and a certain amount of age 25 and a
Time
certain age.
released.
Yeah, exactly. Time release, time restrictions. They also wanted to make exceptions for certain circumstances, like a medical situation or education situation, stuff of that nature. That kind of level of detail is what you can do with trusts. But I always tell people this too. Wills really only affect you after you die, right? I mean, that's when they go into effect, but a trust can also be when you're living as well. So having power of attorneys and stuff like that inside of the will, inside of your trust. So let's say you're incapacitated, you and your wife are incapacitated. Well, you can still dictate, what the trustee can do, what they can't do, how they can use the assets, and how they can't use the assets. So a trust is just it, you're going to go through the inventorying of your process one way or another, right? All your accounts. It's just a matter of whether you want your kids, your grandkids, or whoever to go through that process when they don't know where the heck half your assets are or your accounts are or whatever you want to leave. Or you can just do it yourself because you've already inventoried. Most of you out there probably already know which accounts do what and stuff of that nature. So why don't you just set it up into an official legal document so that it's already taken care of, so the loved ones that you have don't have to go through that.
Yeah. Real quick. So there was a couple things you mentioned. I want to go over one. Justin said you're going to do it anyway. For those of you who are, I'm going to sound condescending, but if you're lazy and decide not to do this and you die without a will or you die without a trust, it's what's called intestate. And at that point, the state will distribute your assets. Trust me, you don't want that. What they'll do is they'll just say, okay, who's your immediate family, who's related, who's close, and their closeness to you will become the determinant of how much of your estate they get once the estate sells everything. That's probably the most expensive one, and the distribution process is terrible. So, that's a bad one. And Big Ed makes a really good point here. With a trust, what you're doing is you're basically saying, so I've got a home. That home is in my name. Well, that's going to have to go into the trust. So I would actually move the house into the trust. So the title on that would now be registered to the trust. And as time goes on, you're going to want to be updating that. And maybe you buy a new car. Well, you can put that into that trust as well, but you'll want to keep updating those things. Good point, Big Ed.
Yeah. And what Big Ed makes a good point of as well is that because some of you out there are sitting there going, yeah, I already talked to a lawyer. I got retirement accounts and stuff like that can skip probate. You're absolutely right. Most retirement accounts can skip the probate process by having a designated beneficiary or named beneficiary. However, properties really can't. In most states, properties can't skip the probate process. The only way that can happen is by certain special deeds if they exist in the state, or of course the living trust. So for those of you out there that have a home, have maybe multiple real estate properties, probably one of the best ways is, like Merlin said, set up the trust and then you just title all of those properties, or if we can talk about business structures as well, title the business structures into the trust, because now you have an entity that's going to actually distribute the assets the way that you want to. By the way, in a private manner, probate is public, trusts are private because they're not you. Right. They're its own little entity. So when you die, the trust basically takes over. So it's a very private process, a lot less expensive whenever you pass away, and much quicker.
Oh man, you started going down the route of other entities as well, which we could probably sprinkle on there. But as a starting point for everybody, even if you're not thinking about a trust, I think Justin brought up a good point. I would make a list of all of your accounts and write those out in front. You have a spreadsheet or something that you work with, so you know all of your accounts. And I would make it a point to go through all of those accounts and make sure you have a designated beneficiary. Then there's no ambiguity as to where this goes. Oh, this is going to Bob or Mary or whomever. That will save you a lot of grief down the road. Should something unpredictable or crazy happen to you, those assets go where you want them to go. So that's a simple step to start with.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, you guys should already have that done anyway. I mean, if
Some people don't. You open an account and it's just you just real quickly click a button and you're done.
but if you're anywhere close to 10 years or less from being retired, I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, these are some of the things you have to start figuring out and you have to start having an income plan for what you're going to do. You need to start doing what you're going to do about taxes and Medicare. I mean, I know this is stuff that you don't want to do. Nobody wants to do it, but you've got to do it. Otherwise, that's why, by the way, the plug here, the company's Proactive Investor, and I named it that way because the reality of it is that if you're not proactive about some of these things, they can really come back and hurt you later on. Like, for example, taxes, and we talked about that quite a bit in past shows. If you're not proactive about that stuff, that's really gonna hurt you in the future.
You know,
And likewise with estate planning, if you don't have the estate's documents in place and have thought about how to structure your distribution when you die, you're just running into a buzzsaw later on.
yeah, absolutely. And another thing here is when you look at these trusts or different estate pieces, we can look at the tax side of it. So typically there's estate taxes. If it's a will, there's most likely going to be estate taxes. If with certain trusts, you can skirt some of those estate taxes. And I think you talked about it the other day or last time we were on, was the kind of the step up for real estate, right? So if I bought a home for 100,000, it's now worth $1 million. Well, that's $900,000 worth of long-term capital gains essentially. But with certain structures, I can now pass that on to my family at the $1 million value, and that $900,000 worth of capital gains kind of just goes away.
Yeah. Well, that's another mistake that folks make because again, I can hear people, maybe out there going, well, yeah, Justin, you can pass real estate on without probate. I just put my son on my property. Well, there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to do that. We don't even have to talk about the liability reasons why you don't want to do that. But just simply on this on the cost basis, if you were to pass away in a situation like that, only half of the house will step up to the market value, meaning that let's say your house is, let's say, $1 million and you paid $500,000 for it. Well, what happens if you co-own that with a kid, right? A child of yours. What happens when you pass away? Your half is going to pass over to the kid, but it's going to be passed along at your cost basis, which was $500,000. So there'll be that portion of your asset will be then taxed fully. The kids portion, yeah, that'll be obviously stepped up because they're still alive. But you don't want to do that. You're missing out on the step up basis of the whole entity. If you have a house and it's in a trust, it just steps up to market value whenever you pass away. So that $1 million doesn't matter what you paid for it. The cost is now that $1 million whenever you go.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever they sell it for, there's not a huge significant tax burden.
And these structures also, I'll bring up this another little tidbit of info for you. These structures also benefit you even if you're not planning on dying anytime soon. So for example, if you put your assets into a trust, your home, your cars, etc., and you are in some litigation, there is a layer of protection between you and your estate. And depending on which trust type it is, you do have a layer of legal protection there. So if you are in an industry that might be litigious, you could set up a trust and protect your assets that way. So if someone were to sue you, you're like, oh, I don't really have any assets. I got like $500 in my bank account, but you're getting paid out of that trust. That's a separate entity, and all your assets are inside the trust. You're protected that way as well. So one other great argument for a trust.
Yeah, now that's where we have to separate the different types of trust.
Correct.
So a revocable trust is something that you set up. It uses the trust itself uses your social security number as the identification number. So your trust, while it distributes well when you die, it's still fully, all those assets in there are fully your responsibility, and under any kind of there's no legal protection in that way if you get sued.
With revocable trust.
Yeah, that's a revocable trust.
Yep.
Now the irrevocable trust, that's its own separate entity that you actually have to register. So right there, now you have something that has some legal protection or liability protection, but more importantly, it has some tax protection. So if you actually have if your estate right now, your total estate value is, let's say you're $3-4 million right now, you may want to consider other sorts of trust and other structures of trust and combinations of trust. You can actually set up combinations of these trusts to help reduce your tax liability, because the federal tax provisions. I'm sorry, I'm not saying this right. The estate exclusions. Right now they're at like 11 point something million dollars. So you're thinking some of you are thinking, I don't need to set up some fancy trust for that. Yeah, but in 2026, when some of these, the 2017 tax laws sunset, the the estate exclusion comes back down to about 6 million. So what I'm saying to you is that if you guys have $3-4 million at this point, and you think over the next 20 years you're going to have over that 6 million threshold, it would be highly intelligent of you to start exploring the world of what are called either AB trust, which are a combination of trust, or irrevocable trust, to start to park some assets into those, so that it takes, because if you can separate your estate, well, now you don't have such a large estate, because
Right.
anything over the estate exclusion is taxed at 40%. So who wants to give 40% of that money to, the government?
Yeah, and this is where it really does come down to planning and having, knowing all those pieces, which is beyond my capabilities. I'm sure you probably know a lot more than I do with regards to the trust and the planning side of it. But I think it just beleaguers the point that you want to make sure you get started as soon as possible with this. And I would say, regardless of what your estate is at present moment, right? It's just planning now and saying, okay, I'm going to continue to grow and build and get to a point where I'll have a lot more assets, and now they'll all be protected.
And by the way, we can kind of run through a few examples just to kind of go over maybe what you might want to think about.
Sure.
So if you're just, yeah, mom and pop, you got, you know a few hundred thousand, maybe $1 or $2 million of assets, and you're really not going to think you're going to have any kind of estate tax problem in the future. And you have pretty simple. I mean, maybe you have a couple real estate properties or your home or something of that nature. Then probably the smartest thing to do would be really set up just a regular revocable trust, a living trust. Okay. Just between you and your spouse. You would set up you and your spouse as the trustee, and then you would set up a loved one as the successor trustee. And what that'll allow you to do is, whenever you die, your assets, when both of you die, your assets pass along through the trust to the beneficiaries of how you laid it out in the trust. Okay. Kind of the next step up would be if you actually have multiple real estate properties, right? Then in that case, you may consider, if you want some liability protection, you may consider having an LLC, right? A limited liability company. That's a structure that provides you limited liability, right? So you'd put your real estate properties under the LLC, and then you would have the trust own the LLC. That way you have a combination of now liability in case something were to happen, while you're living, but also have the distribution method in case you're incapacitated or you pass away.
Hmm. I like the layering of it. See, now you're making me think over here. I always love it because having guests on, you learn new things. I have LLC, and I've actually been working on the trust. I have this huge book of trust stuff, so I've been kind of building mine over the years. But I never thought about wrapping the LLC into that corporation. Interesting.
Well, now we actually have another step up.
Oh man.
So the next step up would be, now if you're really thinking, hey, you know what, I'm gonna start getting over that estate threshold. Well, now you could consider a couple different things, but you could set up what's called an AB trust. So an AB trust can do that, has the same functions of what we were just talking about, but an AB trust basically, at death of one of the spouses, splits into two separate trusts, right? And those two separate trusts, one will be more of an irrevocable trust, and the other will be still a regular revocable trust. Now, why we do that is because if you have a spouse, what happens is they retain control over both of those things, but they can't make any changes to the irrevocable trust. So you would stuff maybe half of it. Let's say you think you're going to die with about $10 million. So you and your wife going to die with about $10 million of assets. The problem is that the estate exclusion applies to both of you individually. But if you just have a singular trust, what will happen is that you'll negate one of your exclusions. So in order to take advantage of both exclusions, what you would do is set up an AB trust. And upon death, you'd have, let's just say 50-50. Half go into the irrevocable trust, and then half go into the revocable trust, the spousal trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
The spousal trust, the wife can do whatever she wants, change the beneficiaries, whatever that may be. And she can use the irrevocable trust. I mean, she can use the money within the irrevocable trust, but she can't make changes to the beneficiary at that point because it's its own separate entity, right?
Right.
But that allows you to use your estate deduction, right, or exclusion on the irrevocable side of things. So you get the 6 million exclusion. And then when she dies, she can then also on her half get the $6 million exclusion. And then both of those funnel to the kids.
Wow. It's like this. It's like a shell game when you deal with this. It's like this complex chess game where I need to move this piece here. Oh, checkmate. I think ultimately that's our goal, is to get to the point that we win that game by keeping as much money as possible. And of course, when I pass away, I won't really care because I'm gone. So who cares what happens to the money? But at least knowing that there's a certain pride I would have in knowing that Uncle Sam didn't get as much money as they could have from my estate because I did things the right way through planning.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, where are we at on time here? I was just looking at I have got a new clock and it's not working today. I thought I had all set up, but didn't get set up in time. Well, so you don't do estate or trust, but you do estate planning through the Proactive Investor.
Yeah, I mean, we do estate planning, and then what I have is a professional service. So basically, I meet with the client. We set up the overall plan. It's just not the estate plan, but part of that plan will be the estate conversations.
Right.
Right. And if they do want to set up like a living trust, what we do is I've obviously got paperwork and stuff like that with the questions. And it's really simple for me. I just take those questions that are going to be on the trust, and any notes that they want to make or special provisions that they want to have. And I just pass it along to the financial service that I have. I obviously outsource, but a professional service. And what happens is that, lawyers actually draft the trust. They pass it back to me. I review it with the client. And if that's the way they want it, bam, they just notarize it. We start beginning the process of transferring, titling things into the trust, just to make sure that all that stuff is, because even if you set up a trust, if you don't title anything into it, well, doesn't matter. You just set up something that is like building a house and not living in it.
Right.
So, yeah, and it's much less expensive that way for most of the folks that I work with. If you're setting up a simple trust, it'll cost anywhere from $600 to $700 for a simple trust. If you start to get into assigning LLCs into it, multiple different real estate properties, each of those have another additional cost because the lawyer has to prepare the transfer title work to that. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot less expensive than if you were just a straight go to an estate attorney to do that.
Yeah. All right, let me bring up the page over here. I thought I had it up and running. There we go. We're going to show you. This is theproactiveinvestor.com. I've showed you guys this one before. This is Justin's site where he does financial services. And if you want to know more, you can contact him there. There's a check us out point. Did you have there it is, the schedule a meeting button right up at the top right hand corner. If you click on that one, that'll bring you to a page where you can sign up and get all set up for a personal consultation with Mr. Justin Krebs.
You make it sound so awkward, man.
A personal consult. There's a nice velvet couch in the lobby,
No, I mean, I in case people haven't seen me on the show before, it's just straightforward. It's honestly, it's about finding something that works for you. I'm not, I've set my practice up to be, hopefully pretty unique. So, there's no catches here. You want to talk about something, we'll talk about it. If not, that's okay too. So,
well, the thing is, everyone's different. Everyone's got different needs, assets, wants, goals, objectives, backgrounds. So, you have to kind of custom tailor things to what the customer wants. So,
well, yeah, I mean, and that's the part about estate planning, that you have to consider all the other elements of your entire financial picture, not just, hey, oh, this trust sounds good thing, right?
mm-hmm.
You got to figure out whether it's actually the right move for you.
Funny because we've talked about so many. It's interesting when we bring you on. It's like, okay, we get you on once a month, but we don't want to repeat the same topics. And the beauty is, in your industry, you've got, we can do shows on annuities, we can do trust, we can do portfolio construction, we can do, alternative investments. I see Lisa for the next show, she says, one day, can Justin go over 529 plans, the new rules going into effect in 2024? Well, maybe we can talk about different retirement plans. I mean, we can do that. We'll do that at the next one.
We can even do Medicare.
Ooh, no, that's just depressing for me. I don't want to do that. All right.
Well, Medicare and Social Security. There we go.
Wow. Two things that will probably disappear by the time I retire. I know you don't think it is.
You have like one person one person tuned into the show for that one.
No, we'll do better than that. All right, Justin, wait, thank you so much. I appreciate you giving us some thoughts on trust, estate planning, which I think is absolutely critical to everybody, regardless of age. The more you plan ahead, the more prepared you're going to be when something finally does happen, and anybody around you will benefit from that preparedness. As I see Thomasina talking about how your mom had taken care of all this stuff already and made it real easy for you should something happen, right? I mean, that should be the ultimate goal. Last thing I remember when my mother passed away was like this horrible, depressing thing, and you still have to deal with all this other stuff. If it was just streamlined, it would have been so much easier on everybody involved. So hopefully, you guys can plan that way as well. So thank you so much, Justin. I appreciate it, and I look forward to getting you on in our July show.
Yeah, it's July 4th, so we got to figure out. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that's not going to happen. No, I won't. There's no show July 4th. Nope, certainly not.
All right, buddy.
All right.
We'll figure something else out.
Sounds good. Take care, my friend.
Okay, man.
Guys, that was Justin Krebs of The Proactive Investor, which I will bring up the page over here. If you want more information, you can contact him directly. He's got a little schedule a meeting button at the top. It's one of the reasons I like bringing him on is he is a pretty straight shooter. So, generally what happens with guests on this program is it's people that I like or know or respect, and if that respect is burned or lost, I don't bring them on the show anymore, which is why I've never had Sam Seiden on the program, because I don't trust, respect in any way, shape, or form that guy. So, but there's other people I like to bring on because I think they do bring something to the table, and they offer either a product or service or a style that might help you in your goals and objectives. So, that one's been the government will just print more money. Yep, that they will. All right, let me real quickly just dive into what we had for our markets today. Obviously, the crypto world is just wild right now with what's going on with Gary Gensler, the SEC, the lawsuits, Binance in particular. The good news is Coinbase has been planning for this. I actually just tweeted out the graphic from Coinbase. Let me see if I can bring this up for you and share it. I just want to so you guys can see it. It was pretty cool. So here. You can probably hear the audio as well. I know for the podcasters out there, that might be a bit challenging because you didn't get to see that one, but it's a very interesting video put together by Coinbase, which I think does a really good job of making a good argument. For the numbers there were the number of times we mentioned staking in our public S1 report, which is what's required, and they say 57 times they've mentioned that one. You go to the number of times that they met with the SEC in 2020 alone, asking for guidance, and this is where this war is going to get really good here, because Coinbase has documentation of 30 encounters where they tried to get guidance from the SEC, who has subsequently shut them down. 30 times you've asked for help, and they are not giving it to you. So this video is great. I'm going to just read the numbers for the podcasters. Percentage of assets that they reject because they don't pass legal standards. 90% of the projects that come to Coinbase, they decline because they're scam coins, they're shit coins, they're meme coins. They really serve no purpose, and they don't meet the guidelines of the SEC. So they are being selective and saying, hey, we don't want these things to contaminate our site. What's the next one? The year the test was written that the SEC uses to determine if tokens are securities. 1946. We didn't have internet. Computers weren't a thing back then. There was no tokenized anything back then, so the law is completely outdated. Great point there from Coinbase. The risks of jobs being driven offshore. This is one of the points I've been making. I guess I could just do here. You don't have to look at me. Number of risk of jobs being driven offshore. 1 million jobs whether that's going after, the developers of these protocols, the exchanges, the miners, over 1 million jobs. My guess is it's probably more than that. And then probably my favorite one is right here. Countries currently establishing comprehensive rules for crypto. 33 countries, and we are supposed to be the financial leader for the world. And how many have we done? Well, it says right here, comprehensive rules the SEC has established for crypto in America, 0. Brilliant ad, great posting. I am trying to do as much as I can to support Coinbase in this one because they're at the forefront of this fight, which is absurd. It's really ridiculous. So by protecting investors, the SEC is trying to freeze the account of Binance, which of course has accounts of investors. So now you and I won't be able to get our assets off there if they freeze those accounts over at Binance. So it could get pretty ugly. The SEC should be ashamed of their own conduct. Yeah, Liz, blows my mind. I really just left scratching my head. Now there's a lot of other individuals that have stepped up here. Oops, turn that off. That have stepped up and made points here, like Senator Loomis said some really nice comments about this on the SEC is just ridiculous. They're incompetent. They can't do their job. They're bullying. And I agree. I think those are all valid arguments. So this is the big fight that's going on right now. What was interesting is even though you had that announcement, let's look at the spot price of Bitcoin here real quick just so you guys can see that. And I know I'm not going to spend too much time because I know many of you don't care about Bitcoin. That's okay. Here's the chart of Bitcoin. Notice the huge knee-jerk reaction today. It's up 5%. And if you look at the daily here, I don't have an explanation for this. I'll be honest. I don't know why all of a sudden this morning when they went after Coinbase, when they went after Coinbase, why we saw this huge surge up. It's almost maybe it's the poke the bear kind of thing. Like Coinbase was ready for this. Coinbase had everything lined up, and I think they've just been waiting for the SEC to come after them. And now it's gloves off, let's brawl. So I'm hoping that the collective unity of the younger generation and those of us who believe in digital assets in the future it may hold, and kind of what the benefit it brings to society, will stand up and fight for this. And if I can watch a figurative black eye formed on Gary Gensler and the SEC, I'd be very, very happy with that one. Really just astounding, the actions by the SEC. They're claiming protection, and they're claiming it's all securities, whereas the video from just a few years ago clearly shows Gary Gensler saying 75% of all crypto is not a security. And now he's saying, well, everything is securities. Anyway, let's run through our top 7 markets just so we can get that out of the way. Bitcoin, obviously the best performer today, while it was the worst performer yesterday. Start our way at the bottom. Here's your crude oil chart, which had that huge gap up on the note that the Saudis were going to cut production. Right, that caused that big gap up, but subsequently gave back most of it. Today we had a slightly red candle, but had a long bottoming tail, so some great momentum to the downside there for crude oil, ultimately down 0.57% to 71.74. NASDAQ, I got an alert on my S&P, which I'll show you here. Did not short the NASDAQ today. Again, I've got this kind of double spinning top, right? This is just uncertainty, not a lot of trading range, really condensed range for NASDAQ. So that further bolsters my argument for a pullback. If we don't get it by Thursday, then you'll probably see it move up. I think this hesitation is going to start to roll over tomorrow or Thursday. Wednesday. Here's the Dow chart. No big deal with the Dow, right? You just had that one big pop, and all you have was a little spinning top today. So nothing noteworthy there for the Dow. S&P. Oliver says, I care about Bitcoin. I do too. I think Bitcoin is going to be the biggest piece of this, but if they start shutting down the exchanges and not allowing us to convert back into fiat currencies, that could create some problems. So here's your S&P. I did get an alert. My alert was triggered, but I don't trade the opening 5 minutes of the markets anymore, and luckily that was my rule, because if you look here, let's just go show you what happened on the open. But there's my, right here. I can't even find the time clock. So there's your, this red line down here was the line that I use, and it opened up above it and then ripped down below it. I don't trade the opening 5 minutes, so fortunately, did not get me short because it just rallied up from there. Now, the rest of the day was kind of choppy, but did not get me short on that one. I will still wait on the NASDAQ chart, which I think is looking a little bit better. But we have on the daily here, a small green candle that formed, and I actually got a message from a friend saying it's a bull flag forming. I don't know about that, if that's a bull flag, but we will wait and see. Right now, I'm still bearish on the markets overall, at least short term. Here's gold, up 0.36% today. Nothing really noteworthy there from a technical perspective. 1981 is our current price for gold. Russell was surging today. Tom's not here, but we have that rip out of the upper box. Now you're going to end up going to 1880. That's your obvious next target right there, is the origin of that big fall back in March. So I see the Russell, just with whatever reason, having great momentum. Most of the other indexes were down or flat. Well, you had the Russell just ripping 2.68% today, so not too shabby. And then you had your Bitcoin pressure. Of course, that has to do with contract rollover, I'm sure. There's always those weird disparities when you get contract rollover. And lastly, you got the Bitcoin, which we already looked at, 6.34% gain for the futures market. All right, that is what I have for today. California says, am I correct in believing that U.S. dollars held on the Binance exchange are safe? I'm not sure about that. If you freeze accounts, dollars are frozen, right? So I don't believe that Binance is registered, has FDIC insurance. If they had FDIC insurance, then yeah, your dollars would be protected. I don't believe they do. And if they get this restraining order through, which I'm going to be following that because it could happen any second, it may have already happened that the restraining order goes through, that would freeze all assets. And what I don't know is, in that statement, does that mean just their personal accounts, or is that all crypto accounts, which is where your crypto and my crypto is being held at Binance.us. So yeah, that's a real scary one. If those assets are all frozen, then I won't be able to pull anything out. I am in the process right now, but some of my crypto I have to unlock. So I have 6 days, which means I will probably be forced to endure another painful process with Binance as I wait for my money to become unlocked so I can remove it to my cold storage and just sit on cold storage until we get some clear regulation from our government about what the heck is going on with crypto. Yeah, so California, can't tell you. I don't know if that the money will be safe there. They've shown proof of reserve, so they should have the assets, but they talk about commingling of funds, which is that dreaded word that was used in the FTX meltdown as well. So FTX was commingling funds. I think that Binance is a much better company, a trustworthy company than FTX. But again, I don't know. I'm not working for either one of these firms, so I can't really tell you because I haven't looked at the financials of them. But I'm not freaking out, but I am. I'd rather have my crypto off Binance.us right now, just because the regulators have just declared war, and it could get ugly. Okay. Did I have questions? I did. So Diana, you sent this one in. You said, when you have time, can you talk about how to set up a trust? So to the conversation we had with Justin, you could find a professional. Certainly having a lawyer would help, but remember, anytime you bring a lawyer into the equation, things get really expensive. Could you use LegalZoom? Sure. There are also books out there. Yeah, do you say clear direction from government? Yeah, never big if. I never say that. Obfuscation, I believe, would be the term for new government, which is where you hide things. Diana, when I did probate, I actually had a book. My dad bought me a book on probate, and it was really kind of nice. It had all the forms and everything you're supposed to fill out, so it's just a lot of work and mapping out everything. I would say if you want to start setting up a trust, the first thing you should do is just know where everything's at, right? Know where all of your assets are at. Step number one. So make a list and say, here's where this is. Here's my car, my house, my gold jewelry, right? I identify all that stuff. And then the next step I would say is to go to all of your accounts, like your brokerage accounts, your trading accounts, your savings accounts, and anything where you can add a beneficiary. Go ahead and put in that beneficiary for those assets or for those accounts on there. So that's all taken care of, and that frees up a lot of the uncertainty. And then once you have that all mapped out, then go look at which trust is better for you. You have revocable trust, you have irrevocable trust. There's different structures that you can use, and there's another dozen types of trusts that you could layer in there, as well as maybe even having a corporation or an LLC involved. So there's levels of complexity that you probably don't need right now. But as a starting point, Diane, anybody else, maybe you should start by mapping out exactly what your assets are so you know where they are. Imagine how difficult it is for somebody who doesn't know you. I when I do sessions like this, it always cracks me up because I look at the way that I do things, the way that I hide things, and I'm pretty sure that if I were to suddenly pass away, there'd be a lot of money that would just disappear because nobody would know what to look for. So I need to fix that. But when I had COVID the first time, I actually wrote out a good chunk of my will and where all the proverbial bodies were buried. So it actually was a good process because what it did for me is in in the discovery and learning process, not just of trading, which I've been doing for 27 years, but crypto, I've opened lots of accounts. I've got accounts all over the place. So I actually, with trading, I ended up closing 1, 2, 3, 4 accounts that I don't really use, and each one of those had some money sitting there, and I brought those into one account, consolidated those down, and I might even consolidate a little bit more to whittle it down to just a couple firms that I would use. With crypto, at one point I had over 30 different exchange accounts and exchanges and locations where crypto was. So I started closing those ones out and moving crypto to more centralized to me, fewer locations than I did before. So I started to streamline where all my accounts were located, wrote all those down, and I'll start to work better to refine that process. But I don't plan on going anywhere for another 50 years or so. Who would access your cold wallet? Yeah. That's actually there. So I have a certain methodology that I've used to access my cold wallet. You're right. How's someone going to access my nano ledger here? I have a special way, but I can't disclose that to you because then I would defeat the purpose of me having a secret methodology to it. But there are certain little tricks and tools you can do, mental games, puzzles that you could do that will allow you to reveal certain words of your code, of your seed phrase to access that cold wallet. So yeah, you're right. The cold wallet's the trickiest one. Obviously, the easiest way is when I pass away, someone would have access to, my executive would have access to my P.O. box. They open up that P.O. box, and then it would say the nano ledger and have my seed phrase on one of those pieces of paper. So that's one way to do it. Sounds good, Big Gab. I think I need to come down to San Diego and have a beer with you. So that was the first question came in from Diana. How much time do I got left? Oh man, I didn't want to do an hour show today. I'm going to do a couple questions here, and then I'm going to wrap things up because I don't want to do an hour show. But Michael, you sent in some great questions. I'll probably get to those on Thursday's show. The first one was, we were talking about Apple and their new goggles set for $3,500. No way I'm buying that. If anybody wanted to, you're welcome to buy it for me as a gift, but there's no way in hell I would buy one of those things. That's just not my style. No way. But they must know sales won't be good for this. Apple's not dumb. They know their market. Maybe they just want to break even on the beta as they develop their technology. It reminds me of one of the classes I had in college. It was a marketing class. We had to create a software. And we didn't really create the software. It was a hypothetical. We created a software company, and you had to say, what is our focus for the software? Do you want to be the highest end software out there that has a very high price, but you don't sell a lot of it? Or do you want to be that Walmart theory? I want to be the cheapest platform out there, and I want to be a mass distributor of this software. And you kind of had to choose those ends of the spectrum and where you fell within it. Apple, in this case, has decided to be the highest end that you can get, the most expensive one out there, and they're going for that. And I think what they're testing it out is to see how many they actually sell. I know some social influencers that are like, I'm buying it no matter what. Day that thing comes out, I'm buying it. When you listen to the recording, when they unveiled the price at that Apple conference, it was hilarious. People started laughing. Some people gasping, oh, wow. Kind of crazy, the price point. So I don't think that they're dumb, Michael. I think that they're just testing it out. And they know that I don't know what their cost point is, but let's say their cost to manufacture this thing is $400, probably less than that. They're the first one in the industry that has this technology. Nobody else has those see-through goggles that integrate current world with virtual world. If you're first to market with a product, you charge the highest price. They will get a lot of sales. I just don't think it's going to be, mass market adoption. What'll happen is they will come out with a version 2 in a year after that. So 2025, they'll come out with version 2 with a lower price point, better features and functionality, and then it'll start to pick up a little bit more. But yeah, I don't think that they're stupid. I think that this is a well thought out plan. I personally, if I was Apple, I would have done a lower price point and tried to sell more units, but maybe production is the issue of these units. And maybe they're going, okay, well, we can't produce this many. Let's just charge a higher price to accommodate for the amount that we can produce. And maybe they get the infrastructure in place and they can start mass production and maybe price drops at that point. Yeah, I'm sure, Oliver. I know some people are going to buy it and it ain't going to be me. GameStop apes will buy the Apple goggles. Well, as Ron White, one of my favorite comedians, says, as he's got his glass of whiskey and he's got a cigar in his hand, he says, you know what you can't fix? You can't fix stupid. Love Ron White. Good stuff. So I wanted to get to more questions. So Betty, you had some good questions. I'll get to those tomorrow. Michael, you had a couple of other good ones. Not tomorrow, on Thursday's show. For tomorrow, I'm going to have John O'Donnell on the program. We're going to talk some macro stuff. We're actually going to talk Bitcoin. I want to see what John's thoughts are on the current status of the Bitcoin war that's going on. But we'll talk about all things financial markets with J.O. tomorrow. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, let us know. You can send them on in at TraderMerlin@gmail.com, or you can put your comments down below any of the YouTube videos as Michael and Betty and others have done. Keep them coming there. I will get those on Thursday's show. I'll answer all those questions, and John O'Donnell will help me answer some more tomorrow. California says it's a pretty phenomenal piece of technology. You'll never have to take them off. I know. I think it's really cool. I think it's very cool, especially I could do the show with the goggles on, but I could have all the things. I don't need a screen anymore. I could be running the show with just my set of goggles. That's kind of cool. Anyway, not doing that. I'm not buying it. Still not buying it. I think there's better use of $3,500 in my mind. So, all right, that's going to do it. Hope you guys enjoyed the show today. Again, Justin Krebs is our guest from The Proactive Investor. If you'd like to know more, check out his website. He's got schedule a meeting with him to learn more about trust, estate planning, or just financial advisors. He's a great guy, honest, worthy, and trustworthy, so check him out. And tomorrow, we'll have John O'Donnell, also coming to us from South Carolina, North Carolina? The Carolinas. We'll have Jay on the program tomorrow. If you want something specific covered, let me know. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.